Welcome to A State of Mind Studios. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Bryan, and we're here to talk about ETIVE watches.
I'm pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming along. Talk us through your background pre this concept, pre this project, and this item that we're going to be talking about today, Daniel.
So, academically, I went to university and studied to be a naval architect. So after 5 years at uni, I finished that, and now I live up north in Aberdeenshire, and my full-time job is designing boats. So I do that for sort of fishing industry and the aquaculture industry, and the offshore industry in general. Is a boat designer. That's my profession. And with that, learned how to use sort of AutoCAD and Rhino and all the different sort of design elements. But prior to that, in school, I was a very avid climber.
Mm-hmm.
And spent a lot of time up north in the Scottish mountains. And one of the first mountains I've ever climbed was called Buccleuch Moor, and that's where the name came from. I think that was around 2011 or 2012. I went on a climbing trip up north, and it was a trip that we thought was going to be more just a walk
Mm-hmm.
up a mountain in Scotland with outdoor education people. And when you go up to Glencoe and you come around the corner, Buccleuch is the first mountain you see. It stands very proud on the corner of Glen Etive and Glencoe. It's a very imposing sight. And we got there, and I remember we came out the minibus, we were walking up, and the route kind of splits. And to the right is the path up the mountain, and to the left is the route to go if you're going to be climbing it. And we thought we were going to take the path up, but the climbing instructor took us to the left and took us to this big flat 100-foot face and told us to wait here. And he climbed up and set a rope up, and we all climbed up after him. And over several hours, we full on rock climbed up with the teacher going first, putting in all the kit, then us going up after him. One by one, stumbled up to the top of Buccleuch, and that was one of the first introductions I ever had to the Scottish mountains, and that's something that's stuck with me all these years.
Thrown right in at the deep end. There was no going back there, was there?
No, there wasn't. But luckily we were all experienced climbers, so we did have half an idea what we were doing, but it's a different kettle of fish when you're outdoors compared to being in the climbing centre in Govan.
When I think about Scotland and its mountainous regions and its Munros and that whole aspect to this country, I think that a lot of people who are resident here may take it for granted and may not get the opportunity to see the beauty of the country from such peaks. But I watched a documentary about Hamish McInnes, who was a guy who was based in Glencoe. He became so much of an expert at rock climbing that he literally wrote the manual that went worldwide, and he designed lots of the tools, and he became an advisor on a lot of the movies, such as Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone, etc. So that kind of thing intrigues me. What else do you get from climbing some of these mountains and Munros? What else do you get? Is it good for your mental wellness, for example?
Definitely, that's something Dad and I were chatting about, is when we get a bit stressed or anything, we just like to get outside, being in the mountains, being in the fresh air. I think it's a very good healer for clearing your mind and just trying to take your mind away from things and thinking about something else. But also, it's a good opportunity to go out and have a clear mind to think about something. If you've got something in the business that's sort of worrying you a little bit, it's really nice to get outside and have a clear space to think about that. And if you're with somebody, being able to talk about it and not have a distraction. And I think being in the mountains, with them being so big, it makes you realise how small you are, and it really makes you realise how small your issues are in the grand scheme of things, really. So I really do enjoy getting out there. And again, when you're climbing, if you're hanging on the edge of a mountain, you've got much bigger issues than if your shipment's delayed a couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was an aspiring climber, give me some recommendations.
I would start off indoors at sort of a climbing gym. I learned at Govan. I actually climbed quite a few times in Rathdale, which isn't too far from here. When I done it, I was 16, 17 was when I was doing it a lot. And at that point, I had a very good strength to weight ratio because I hadn't fully grown up yet. Now, when I go back to try and do it, it's a lot more difficult because I put the pounds on. But back then, I was a bit more nimble, and it really does help. But just getting out there and trying it, finding a good local gym. There's ones local to Glasgow and Edinburgh. Recently I've seen a lot more people doing sort of bouldering, which is where there's no ropes. It's just maybe 8 foot high with big mats underneath it, and if you fall, you just land on the mats. But it's a great exercise for an all-round workout, and it's a good bit of problem solving as well when you're trying to tackle a route that's well defined.
You know, the big thing about chatting to anybody these days is that you can't go through a discussion without talking about the impact of COVID and the lockdown and how it, either benefited or adversely affected people's lives. And I say benefited because there are a lot of people, like this studio, for example, we were able to build the concept during the lockdown period because we had that time in order to put it into practice and into fruition. Let's have a wee chat about your own experience of lockdown and how you were able to turn that into a positive.
To be honest, I was very fortunate throughout lockdown. I think I took it within my stride quite a lot, and I live with my girlfriend who's very supportive, and we had each other, so we had each other to rely on, and I can imagine it'd be very difficult to not have that. But throughout the lockdown for work, I commute maybe about an hour and a half each day, so I was finding that I was not having to commute, which saved an hour and a half, and also saved the fuel money on that. So I was working from home, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world for me. But I know some other people in the office that wasn't the same experience for them, and a lot of people were itching to get back, and we're kind of optionally back at the office now, but I go in every day because it's nice to be around people in my work, and with what I do, it's quite collaborative, and it's hard to be that collaborative across Zoom. We have quite an open office, and it's good to be able to just chat across the room to people, so it's quite nice to be back there in that environment working again. But throughout COVID, I think it was a good opportunity for me to have a bit more time in my life and be able to channel my passions. And I was very lucky living in Aberdeenshire. It's so vast, and when they were told you weren't allowed to move council area, it didn't really affect me because Aberdeenshire's so vast. You could drive for an hour and still be in Aberdeenshire and still go and climb mountains. So it was I still had everything on my doorstep that I liked to do, which was a big plus, because I know a lot of my friends in Glasgow struggled with not being able to get out of the city, whereas we were a bit spoiled in that we had so much on our doorstep in terms of the countryside to be able to get back into and reconnect. Yeah.
I think that obviously with your background and the products that we're going to be discussing just now, to have a concept is one thing. To have this great idea and have it in sketchbooks and all that kind of stuff is one thing. But the mind boggles when I try and figure out how do you get from having a concept to putting it into practice to the day where you're sitting here today with a whole range of watches. Talk to us about the concept.
So I think growing up, I was always aware that my dad, he's got his own company and he does sourcing and logistics. So that's always been what he does and what he knows. And he's always said, don't get into what I'm doing type thing. So that's why I was sort of pushed to go to university. But I've always had in the back of my mind that he's a great resource of untapped knowledge there that I would like to get out on before he retires. So that's always been in the back of my mind that kids always look up to their parents' jobs and want to do what their parents do. And Dad's always ran his own business and done sourcing and logistics. So I've always thought that's a great resource that I would like to learn from at some point. So then over lockdown, and I started designing these, it was, I think, just bored, not being able to go out, not being able to do anything but having a laptop. I just started sketching and drawing and coming up with ideas and looking around and seeing what the market was for different things. And I really just thought there was a bit of a gap for doing what I wanted to do in the way I wanted to do it. You see a lot of different products, and a lot of people are doing quite a lot of things, but I just couldn't see anything that was doing what I wanted to do. And I think back to when I graduated from university and I wanted a watch to wear to graduation, and although there is obviously loads and loads in the markets at the price point I wanted, there was nothing that was calling me in, nothing speaking to me, nothing that was portraying the image that I wanted to portray with the watches. And I think that's what kind of planted the seed a few years ago, was I want to have something that calls and is marketed at people like myself. And that was the angle I was going with it. So for quite a while I had the seed in the back of my head, and I had quite a few designs lined up. And I think around January, my dad came to me and he said, Daniel, I've been thinking about starting up a business, and I'm thinking about bringing something like nail kits in, and we can try and sell them through Instagram. I was like, Dad, that is a terrible idea. But I've got this folder on my laptop full of watches that I've been looking at. So do you want to have a look at that? And that's what we did. We had a Zoom call and I showed him sort of what I'd been working on and sort of the plans. And he wanted to use my knowledge of the sort of social media, and I wanted to use his knowledge of importing and exporting. And it just kind of came together very naturally that we were both thinking the same thing at the same time, but just never really told each other until we did. And we had it all lined up. So
Brilliant.
it became very natural in a way. And I think as well, throughout COVID, I'm an only child, so my mum and dad was just them back home. I miss my parents a lot. You weren't allowed to see people unless it was for work. So it gave me and my dad something to do together, to bond over and work on and have a call each day to discuss. And then when the company got formed, it meant that I could go home legally and see my parents, because that's where the business is, and I had to go home and see samples and look at designs with my dad and work on it. So it became a very good legitimate excuse to be able to go home and see them, which is crazy when you think about that, talking about legally being able to see your parents. I mean, I've never thought that would be a sentence 4 years ago.
So that was one of the benefits as a knock-on from this incredible kind of process.
Yeah.
And I says to you before, driving through to meet you today, I realised I don't have a watch on. And then I was asking myself why's that happened? It's been a gradual thing, going from wearing one every single day to not. And I think it's down to mobile phones. I think every time you want to check the time, you touch the screen, you look at the time. Was that a consideration with the changes in technology and the fact that these now are permanently in somebody's pocket?
To me, it wasn't ever really a consideration. I mean, you can look at the likes of Apple and Samsung that are bringing out smartwatches. There's still a market for a watch or something on your wrist. And if they can put a phone on your wrist, then people are always wanting to have something on their wrist. And for me, the way I thought about it is, this has obviously changed a lot in the past few years, or past 10 years, but traditionally, a watch was one of the best ways for a guy to express who they are, and it was a statement piece. And obviously that's changed a lot now, but I still think there's a bit of a hangover on that a lot of males will use watches to express a bit about them or have it as a statement piece about their style or their individuality. And that's been true throughout the ages, and I think it will be true going forward. People will always want something on the wrist that reflects who they are to an extent.
Oh, definitely. And what I also like is the fact that, this is something that has that Scottish feel, that Scottish flavour. And we know that there are products and items that go global, and because people do have that affinity with our country.
Yeah.
Was that in the forefront of your mind as well, or is this due to the fact that this was a joint passion of yours?
So when we came up with the ETIVE branding, we had quite a few ideas. In hindsight, they were all quite terrible, but they seemed okay at the time. And then when we came up with ETIVE, I mean, Dad, when he was younger, he used to holiday a lot around Glencloe and Glen Etive with his family. So it's always been somewhere, more specifically Glen Etive, that he's had fond memories of, and me with my fond memories of Buccleuch Etive more. It came together quite well for that. But I've always been, the forefront of the brand for me is I've really wanted to portray an affordable luxury brand, and it's influenced by, the branding's influenced by Scotland, but I've tried to brand it in a way that is that luxury affordable and kind of not an outdoors brand, if you know what I mean. That's been my objective, but there definitely is a Scottish heritage behind that that's worth calling upon.
Definitely. Now, you've got a concept, you've got the know-how from your father. What do you do next?
Trusted Google. Went on to Google, started Googling watch factories and just looking through them, and went to about page 10 on Google, which is a very unbeknown place. I think at one point I was even on Bing trying to...
Is Alta Vista still a thing?
Showing your age.
Too right.
I was, just on the dark edges of the internet that you don't ever really think you'll be on, looking for watch factories, and I whittled down a list of sort of 10 factories, and then went through them and was looking at what sort of things they were currently doing and how what the factory were doing aligned with what I wanted, until I finally found a factory that was doing already producing watches that were similar to what I was wanting to produce and had sort of full range there, because you are limited in a degree to what the factory are geared up to do, what tools they have. So it was a process of just scrounging the internet and looking for that factory until I found one that fitted my vision well, and then it was just a case of getting in contact with them and starting that conversation, which is, it can be quite a hard conversation when you're dealing with people whose first language isn't necessarily English, and it took a while, but we got there in the end, and we got the designs all signed off, and it sometimes felt we were going one step forward to go two steps back, but it was worth it in the end, and I'm very pleased with how they've all turned out.
They look stunning. So talk us through the range of ETIVE watches that you have here today.
So a big thing for me when I was coming up with it is I wanted luxury, affordable luxury, but I didn't want to compromise on the quality. So the movement from all the watches is from the Citizen watch factory, which are quite a well-known brand. And they were, in 1959, they started producing movements to be sold on. So we approached that factory. It's Japanese Minota movement, so it's from a town in Japan called Minota. And the movements, we bought the movements for each one of them from the factory. So we got something that's got a long lines, 60 years of workings behind it, to make sure that it was a good quality movement, because that's the brains of the watch. You need to make sure that that part's up to scratch. So we got the movements, they got sent to the assembly factory when it all came together. With the steel, each watch is made from 316 low carbon surgical steel. So it's a high quality steel. It's the same sort of steel that they would use in dive watches. They're all waterproof to 5 ATM, which is equivalent to a 50 meter water pressure. This one here, I wanted something, this was probably the most masculine design we had. I wanted something that was quite traditional, so that's got the timer on it and the date on it, and it's got a 24-hour on it as well. And that was something that I wanted to have, that was a traditional sort of more masculine style watch with a leather strap. But looking at a lot of leather straps, I found like the shiny leather wasn't quite suited to the market that I was going for. So this is like a sort of suede leather, smooth leather watch on that. And then with these ones here, these are named the Tresca range.
Is that the one you're wearing?
That was the one I'm wearing.
Yep.
Sporting today. This was something I was looking for, something quite modern, something unisex, something that I liked. My girlfriend, she quite likes chunky watches, and I think there's quite a trend just now of females wearing chunkier sort of watches that look a bit more masculine. So that's where I was going with this one. So it's got quite a thin face, so it doesn't feel big on the wrist, but it's still got like quite a large face looking forward, so it suits either a male or a female wrist. It's got the butterfly clasp in there, and it's just a nice plain face that just shows a nice analog time. With this one here, this is a Cubal. It's quite similar to the Zali, but it's got a different face on it. So the Cubal, I always wanted like a gold watch with a blue face, and on this, the blue face is like a gradient. So it's really nice. It catches the light really well. When you look at it, the face is almost shimmering in it between quite a deep blue and a lighter blue, and that shows the date on it as well. So this was one that I go between what one's my favourite, and for a long time this one was my favourite. I just really liked the gold on the blue, and a lot of my peers have liked that one as well. Then the two Zalis here, the Zali Black and the Zali Silver, we went for sort of a large face design with a mesh strap, and we wanted the face to have something a bit more to it rather than just a plain face. So the centre of the face is a gradiented sort of metallic, with the outside it's got like a grooved, like laser etched, to give the face a bit of texture, to bring it out a bit more, and just give the watch something a bit more to it rather than just a plain face on the watch. And that's where we went with those ones.
You know, now that you're sitting here after the concept, the process, the sourcing, and you've got your products here, where next?
Where next? I think for me just now, I'm selling the watches, and I want to get to the point where the watches sell themselves. Once 5 years' time, it would be brilliant if people are seeking out to come. They've heard about ETIVE through a friend or through our social media, and they come and buy a watch, and the watches are selling themselves. It's not me trying to convince people to an extent. I want the watches to speak for themselves, because they are meant to be statement pieces, so I want that to come through and to people to seek us out. That's the goal on it.
Tell us also, we've spoken about social media, how can we get them? How do we seek them out? I mean, in the future, are you hoping that they're going to be stocked in various stores? At the moment, are they available exclusively directly from yourself?
Yes, so just now the website's etive.watch, and they can be purchased on there, include free UK shipping. Down the line, going into local jewellers is something that we would explore, but we want to get to the stage where we've got enough backing behind us to be taken seriously. And I think that's coming from the social media. The marketing that we want to do is heavily based on social media for the first part of it, and then as we go further down the line, it'd be great to get into brick and mortar stores.
Right, one final question. You've got a range of designs here.
Yeah.
Sell one to me and tell me why it suits me.
Can you pull your sleeve up? You've not got a watch on.
Love it. So any of them will do me then.
Yeah. You clearly need a watch.
100%.
The watches, a lot of consideration went into the all-round design. It's not just the watch. The boxes, we went through many prototypes to get to where they are. They're designed so that our business card slots in there and matches up with the logo that's on there. We have a handwritten note in each one thanking people for the custom, because it is a big thing to us that people are supporting us. When you take the watch out, below here you've got a polishing cloth, so the watch always stays looking fresh, and that's branded as well. So there was a lot of looking for different factories to do different things to get where we are today. And the watches truly are. They're great quality. We've had a lot of compliments on our Trustpilot of people saying that they're great quality, and the presentation all comes together to create a very well-rounded product at a very good price point for what they are.
Well, I'm sold. Thank you very much for joining us at A State of Mind Studios. And for everybody watching, check out etive.watch.